Tracy, welcome to Get Shit Done.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
She is like glowing. She has like the soft light behind her, that LA light. We love it. I'm happy she's here. She just asked me how we met, and I was like, wait, who? Usually it's like an introduction or something. And I saw something she wrote on LinkedIn, and I'm like, we need to have her on the podcast. So I reached out, and you were very
Yes.
responsive. So
Yes.
I love it. Happy you're here. And we'd like to do
Thank you.
vibe checks as we start and situate ourselves into the space. So, on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being like super vibey, I'm like ecstatic, super joyful. Where do you feel like you're at in the business in this moment? How are you feeling?
I would say today I'm a 9.5. And I would say that because I'm constantly in awe of the talent that I get to work with and how smart, thoughtful, committed, um, passionate they are. And I've spent my morning on calls with my team. And it just makes whatever I do, I love doing it with people I love and freaking can't wait to talk to. Even when there are problems, every day there are problems in business. But when you're sitting in a room full of problem solving mindset people, it makes it super fun.
Yes. I feel like this is where we just had recorded another podcast right before this. And the vibe, I think, in general, is like the happiest people, or whenever we do a vibe check, when people are like, I'm feeling the most vibey, is always around the people part. It is usually
For
around the
sure.
people part, whether it's in their personal life, in their business, like I get to work with these amazing people. That's usually when I see the shift. So I love this. We're at a 9.5. Awesome. So let's
Yep.
take it a little bit back because I love context. I love understanding how people got to where they are. And a lot of our upbringing and childhoods kind of can shape that, or usually do. So if you take back to little Tracy, what did she want to be when she grew up?
Always an entrepreneur.
Wow. I always
Always.
admire people that are like, I knew I wanted, I was like all over the place. Love that. Tell me more.
Yeah, no, I wait. I first of all, I first understood that everything I ever wanted was on the other side of making money. Okay. So the first time the Cabbage Patch doll or the whatever came out, the I want the Barbie house, I want the la la la. It always was like I have to have the money to go get it. So I was like, okay, people, what's the plan? And everyone would be like, well, Christmas is coming, Santa. I'm like, this guy and I don't know each other. I can't wait for him to show up with everything I want. The Easter Bunny, who the hell is that?
You, as a woman, you learned that very early. I can't wait on this man to give me what I want.
Yeah, I'm like, no, 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 no. Who's in charge? And that whole plan is around having money. So immediately I was like, how do I earn money? So my parents were really good about that. They were really good about like, if you clean your room, you can earn 25 cents if you do this or that. Then I started garage sailing and I was like, ooh, now this is a business. So to ask my mom, can I give this away in a garage sale or can I sell this in a garage sale or do you want this? So I'd open the garage door and I'd start the garage sailing program. My mom's like, we can only have so many garage sales. But I
I was
thought
just
this is a
thinking that.
great way. This is a great way to earn money. So I think for me, being an entrepreneur was not because I fell in love with this thing I wanted to go do. It was more about how do I create how do I go get the things I want to buy and how do I create money to do that? And it made a lot of sense to me. The whole thing made
Mm.
sense.
That's awesome. Okay, so we had this very entrepreneurial little kid. So before getting to Hatch Beauty, what were you doing professionally, and how did that shape how you built this business?
Yeah, the Hatch Beauty was such a gift, but everything we do in life is a step-by-step connection, right? So as a teenager, I was a waitress. How fun is that? I get to go stand in front of a table who has unlimited money and funds and they're hungry. So I already have a buyer. Okay. So as fast as I can ring up that check to the highest amount, the bigger the tip. And the nicer I can be, the better the relationship is, the more I can earn. So waitressing was one of the first ways that I realized that if we can deliver customers something that satisfies what they look for and want, then we are going to make a sale. And Hatch Beauty, frankly, was just another version of doing that exact thing. Hatch Beauty, there were many iterations of figuring out how to co-create or custom develop products for a customer and sell it to them, knowing that they already wanted it. And prior to Hatch Beauty, I would be fortunate enough to find very smart creators or innovators or patent holders of product that had yet to be monetized. And they would say to me, "Oh, I invented this scented nail polish, or I invented this spray-on hosiery, or I invented this microfiber product that whisks, water away from hair and dries your hair faster than anything else can dry it." And I would hear this and say, "Oh my God, that's such an innovative concept. Here's who I think we could co-create that with or for." And that's when I would bring the retailer into the conversation. So I've never looked at retailers as someone I'm going to sell something to. I've always looked at retailers as someone I get to innovate with and think through their problems and their pain points and then bring them back to a solution that I sell them.
So how did we get there? Like you went from waitressing and then you're like, "Ooh, I get to see and hear about all these innovative things and I can connect it to the retailer." How did you even get into that space?
So my first opportunity was really meeting a woman who had invented scented nail polish. She was a chemist and a formulator. She worked for the Department of Justice. She was really bright. She had formulated and invented the actual formula and patented this formula for scented nail polish. I used my Columbia student loans to help her file a patent so that we could have the intellectual property. And that was really the first time. And there was frankly the hardest part in building that business in particular was just getting through to the retailer. Because in the old days, you would call and there would be a switchboard or like a phone, "Hi, you've reached J.C. Penney. Please dial the buyer's number that you're trying to reach." Well, if you don't know the buyer, guess what? You have to round robin until you can figure out who that person is. So whoever would answer the phone, any human on the other side of the phone was like, "Hey, I'm trying to reach the buyer for color cosmetics. Do you happen to know his or her name? Or can you refer me to who that is? I'm trying to reach them." And people are so helpful if you just ask. So 9 times out of 10, it's just being diligent and following through and having a warm personality. But really, that first product, that scented nail polish product, was what built relationships for me around innovation. Because when you tell someone, "I have a nail polish that when it dries up to 5 days, it smells like roses or lilac or chocolate or whatever that flavor was," people are like, "Really? Let me see it. Send me some." So that always kicks off the first conversation. The more innovative your product is, the more you can surprise and delight that person, the more likely you are to get a phone call back.
I love this because like the through line I'm hearing from you from kid to being a waitress to then is how can you demonstrate value that then you're able to reap the rewards from because people are willing to invest in it. So I love this. And one of the top things we find from entrepreneurs who have been on this podcast, one of the top things they do really well is sales and everything you're talking about. And we try to kind of debunk this idea that sales is this really schemy and like just like go really cast a really, really wide net. It's all about relationships. And in every relationships, it's about what are the like inputs and outputs and not necessarily just like 50-50. It's more of like, what value do you bring in that is really appealing to each other that creates this really amazing bond. And it sounds like that's what you did really well. So you're doing sales very well. So
Yeah.
then how the heck did we get to Hatch Beauty? We went from being a kid doing garage sales, being a waitress to, okay, I'm going to help these innovators get into these retailers. And now we have this massive company in the beauty space. How did we get there?
Yeah, it just happened to be one pain point after another. I think in general, and I don't care what business you're in, okay? If you're in the business of making mattresses, you do lawn mowing and gardening for people, you do whatever that business model is. If you are listening to the customer's pain points, they are handing you the golden ticket for how to build and scale your business. And so each of the retailers I would sit with, and believe me, if I went through all the different brands and products that I worked with in different categories, so children's apparel, beauty, jewelry, plush toys, lots of different categories that I did before Hatch Beauty. I just would sit with retailers and hear what is the pain point they have at that time, and this is pre-Instagram, right? So Facebook was a thing, and people understood Facebook, and Facebook had advertising and marketing and direct drop shipping and all those direct aspects of it. But the reality is that was really when print magazines were still driving a lot of excitement. People are looking at the red carpet, they're looking at what's happening at the Oscars, and they're following all these celebrities. They want to be like the celebrity. The retailer's biggest pain point at that point is differentiation. So there are big players, you like CPGs are the L'Oreals and the Unilevers and the Lancomes and all of these large CPG, P&G, they are owning multiple brands. Okay, so these large CPG companies own multiple brands and multiple brands across category. And they're also selling to everybody. So when you think about 60,000 doors of distribution, which is what Hatch Beauty had when I finally sold the business, you have to imagine that when you have that many doors, you need differentiation. So the biggest pain point across every retailer from prestige to mass was how do we surprise and delight our customer and not look like the people across the street? And they all have that issue. So think about it for a second. Every time you drive to go shop at an Ulta, when you think about the other anchor stores in that Ulta, you might have a DFW, you might have a TJ Maxx, you might have a Home Goods. When you start to think about the retailers that you expect to see when you drive in, might be a Cost Plus or a Trader Joe's, you're going to see those same retailers. Every retailer at that time was like, how do I look different than the four other retailers down the street? Because they're all buying P&G, they're all buying Unilever, they're all buying Lancome and L'Oreal or whatever the brands are in those portfolios. So when you hear pain point like that, all of a sudden you're like, huh, I wonder what the innovation sidecar could look like going into and sitting with someone like Costco or Sam's Club or Walmart or Ulta and figuring out how to create differentiation for them.
Got
That
it.
that really that really was the breadcrumb that led us to believe that that could be and would be a viable business model. And I think the other thing that gives people like when they hear the story of like how do you go from 0 to 100 million in revenue on a self-funded business with no PE, with no venture, with just receivables and a nice bank relationship. And the truth is the courage that we had to continue to build was because we went across the pond and saw Boots who had done it already. So the reality is in the world at that time, Boots had successfully co-created and innovated incubated brands that looked like third-party brands inside their four walls and were vertically integrated with manufacturing. So they had the full supply chain all the way from manufacturing facility to shelf. They had the customer data, they had the extra care, the shopping data, they knew what the customer was looking for, and they had successfully figured out how to become that supply engine for innovation.
Got it. I love this. So, for those listening in, what is it that Hatch Beauty is solving, and how did you get started? So, it looked like you were really good at identifying different things, but In the beginning, it's always like, I had to go and show the wireframes, or I had to just go have this meeting. What is this company solving for? And when you were like, I'm going to do this, what did you do to get started to even get those first customers?
Just like every capital constrained entrepreneur who's self-funded and doesn't have a rich uncle and doesn't have the Rockefeller last name, it was like, how do we borrow cash flow from a cash flowing business and reallocate the team resources to building out something that we don't have the cash to buy and support, but that we need to build. And what I say to every entrepreneur who has a day job that's currently paying them, I always encourage, and I know they're very, very disparate schools of thought around this. Some people say, oh, you can't be doing two separate things. You have to jump all in and go for it. I think when you're operating from fear and scarcity, you're never going to have a good outcome. So, what I tell women especially is unless you have a rich uncle or an unlimited supply of income for yourself to support you and your family, please keep your day job and
Keep your
then
day
borrow
job.
time.
Yes.
Keep your day job, borrow time. Why? Because you can come from a place of creativity, of abundance, of excitement. You can lean in. And that's what our agency business allowed us to do. The first year, that agency business generated almost 2 million in free cash flow to us, which paid for our overhead, it paid for our team, and it paid us a pretty meager salary, but it allowed us to have the cash flow to afford the talent that we could then reallocate to building out innovation with retailers because we had to eventually go fund the inventory to support a $10 million year. What that requires is about $3 million in inventory, maybe two and a half. Okay. But you have WIP, you have chemicals, you have all of the building of what that is. So when you do 10 million in a year and you think, okay, 2.5 million in cost of goods, you may have another million or million and a half in corrugate and all these other ancillary things. So being able to be able to afford that when you have $0 to put toward inventory to build something out is, and I'm giving a presentation on this next week because I think a lot of entrepreneurs go out and traditionally raise capital before they've even given their business a chance to grow. So how we did it was we went to our vendors who are these beautiful, smart, successful dudes who have been in the manufacturing space for 20 plus years, who have deep pockets and they thought we were cool and interesting. And we had a good idea. And I showed them transparently my business plan and my forecast. And I said, here's how much I'm going to need to borrow from you in credit. And here's what I'm going to pay you back. And I'm going to ask you for net 90, which is crazy talk because I'm
Net
a
90.
new,
Wow. For coming out the gate, that's ballsy.
right?
Love
But
it.
here I am. I'm like, guys, you're going to either bet on me and bet on us, or I'll keep looking for a vendor who's interested in doing this. But I'd like you to be my partner. So we picked one
Mhm.
packaging partner, one fill partner, one color cosmetic turnkey partner, and we doubled down with those vendors in a very open and transparent way.
Mhm.
And then I turn around to our factor, these really nice people in New York who love purchase orders. And as soon as you are shipping that PO, you can turn that PO in that same day and get your cash. So I moved a cash cycle, which was normally 120 to 180 days, down to, let's say, 45 to 60 days. And that makes all the difference in the world, which is how we got the next year from 2 million to 10 million. And that really helped us go from 10 million to 35 million, which eventually got us to the $100 million mark. And it literally was this combination of borrowing against our vendor relationships and getting long lead time payment terms, turning around and taking purchase orders and invoices that we had just shipped and factoring them, and then sitting in this very uncomfortable place of always worrying about running out of cash and being willing to forego taking income ourselves and knowing that the only thing we had to make sure we did purpose and perfect timing is pay our team. That was one non-negotiable.
Pay your team.
How do you keep the cash in the bank to ensure you can afford to pay your peeps?
Yes. I love this. And it reminds me of so many women that have been on this podcast that they maybe started more of a service-based business that was doing seven figures, and then it allowed them to productize into other things. So that allowed them, like Sofia Contreras, she did the same thing where she then, from a consultancy, was able to look at a deep problem a lot of her clients are having and spin that off into a fintech platform. And it's like a form of R&D, but also it's your investor, which is fascinating. And we look at like de-risking, so what I love that you walked through in terms of the partners you had, you're like, we went to this person and we went to this group and we went there, is that you approached it from a partnership versus just pitching. And
Mhm.
it's like, we already have assets. We have, we have skin in the game. We're funding some of this. And when I hear founders, what I love that you said around, founders trying to, go get funding for growth versus just growing first. You had that. So when you do go to partners, they're not thinking, oh, I'm just funding this idea. We already
Right,
have a viable business that you did not have investors for, that you were able to get off the ground. And so then your partners are like, oh, you have skin in the game. This is a true partnership. Versus, I see this with a lot of entrepreneurs, it becomes you're pitching and that investor or that partner is like, I'm taking on a lot of liability for something that hasn't even been proven in the market and you don't really know anything yet.
right.
You don't know anything yet. So you now are able to establish these relationships beyond that, because I feel like the sales process for a lot of entrepreneurs is really scary, but it's the top thing. Every woman we've had on this podcast has done extraordinarily well through relationships. What do you feel you do well in the business development process to get that buy-in? Because you went to all these people and were like, hey, I'm coming with this. And in order for your platform to work, you needed the buy-in from everyone. So what do you feel like you
Correct.
did well in those conversations to get the yes? Because I feel
Yeah,
like a lot of our listeners, they second guess themselves in the sales process.
yeah. Um, so there were a lot of sleepless nights. Let's be really open about that. There were a lot of sweating moments of like Costco saying, yes, we're excited. Let's approve you as a vendor. And by the way, send us over your financials so that we can get your vendor setup done. And I'm like, oh, you know, how do you navigate some of those conversations around size and scale? Because when you go from a $2 million business to a 10 million, right? No one wants to feel like they're a majority of your income because if something goes wrong, they never want to take responsibility, nor should they, right, for the well-being of your total business. And as a percent to total, people get nervous, like, gosh, are we going to place this business inside of this new vendor that we've never heard of, which is why P&G and why some of these large CPGs are so valuable to these relationships is they are deep pocketed, they have deep marketing dollars, they know they know how to ship on time. There's no issues with scaling and manufacturing generally. So it is a dance, okay? And I have to say, I have the most compassion for those who are in that kind of 0 to 10 million stage because especially if you're on the consumer side, it is incredibly hard to gain the confidence of a retailer on a brand when you're new and first to market. And so, where do you lean? You lean on your supply relationship. So, in our case, I was very excited to have CVS or Target or Costco or whoever come into our four walls, meet our manufacturing partner, do a tour, see the audited product that we had, vet our facilities, because we were using best in class partners. So rather than try to stand on the very light financial profile of what a newer business has in terms of reported financials and all of those things, I brought my partners to the table. So now we're sitting around a conference table with 6, 8, 12 people, all who have decades of experience, deep pockets, lots of manufacturing background, lots of experience. And it gives you a credibility, especially as a newer and up and coming business. It gives you credibility that I think is mission critical to getting new partnerships with retailers. It's a much more democratized world now with TikTok and live streaming and Instagram Live. We do a huge business in TikTok, huge business in Instagram and Facebook Live stream. Um, it has democratized these consumer brands in a way that allows you to walk in and say, hey, yeah, I'm doing 25 million direct to consumer. I've self-funded this. And yeah, I can handle 1,000 new doors. And yeah, I can support that. And there are lots of borrowing tools now that are available to founders to be able to lend and borrow against without being dilutive, which I think a decade ago or even 5 years ago did not exist. And women, especially, what took massive dilution in order to trade financing and capital for growth. So
Mm-hmm.
thank goodness there has been a solution to that. And retailers are also a solution to that. I would go to my retailer and say, I need net 15. I'm a growing business. I
Yes.
need that cash. And retailers many times, especially if you're a minority or diverse founder, many times they would say, listen, this is super unusual and I'm not going to promise you anything, but let me see what I can do.
Yeah. It's just saying it. So I want to break this down because you have the B2B side and the B2C side. So on the B2B side, the relationship part is really critical for, let's say, and also capacity, right? So what would you say to entrepreneurs who are like, I want to establish relationships with these larger retailers? Because a lot of it has to do with the buyers, the people internally. Like, you need to find a champion.
Mhm.
And the other thing I hear, like I remember hearing about the Outdoor Voices founder, her experience getting into, was it Nordstrom or Saks or one of these big, large retailers. Then she's like, you get in, and then you need to have the capacity to fulfill that order, which was like, do we have enough cash to do this?
Mhm.
So when you think of the B2B side for a founder listening in saying, okay, Tracy, I would love to understand how do I develop those relationships and how do I ensure I'm ready to fulfill the capacity, which takes capital to make it happen.
Yeah, it does. And I always emphasize, guys, it's not sell in does not equal sell through. And terms of your deal can be predicated on sell through. What does that mean? That means I ship them $100,000 and I get to invoice, but the retailer can say, we're going to hold back 50% of your payment to see how this sells through. Because if it doesn't sell through, well, then I want to be able to return it. So I'm always a big advocate of taking a smaller bite out of a business relationship and proving that you can execute and that your sell through is going to be at the threshold it needs to be to sustain rather than go into an all door rollout. I have a friend who just was was granted an all door exclusive with a natural retail partner on her launch of her beverage line. And I said, let's make sure we put together a sell through strategy so that we have a business. Because can you guys imagine building enough inventory to support an all door rollout, getting all that inventory out, turning around and selling that into your retailer, expecting full payment? Now your manufacturer is coming to you saying, okay, we shipped it. Let's get that cash back in. You go to your factor, and your factor says, you have consignment on your terms. This is not an inventory. This is not a purchase order I can underwrite. And so I'm going to need to hold back that cash from you until you show me sell through. And then I'll release a percentage of what's owed to you. That's the worst of all worlds to me,
Yeah.
because then you have to think about how you're going to cash manage. I'm always, if someone comes to me and says all door rollout, I'm immediately like, let's try it first. Let's pick 50 doors in the LA region. I can control it. I can see how the consumer's responding. I can go to the store and test it with my team and go out and see how this is doing. Um, and I like smaller commitments. And I would also just say to those listening, if you haven't done retail before, space and location is your holy grail. Not all shelves are equal. So when they say all door rollout, your next question needs to be where in the store and where on the floor would you see me merchandised? And they may say, we haven't figured that out yet. We're in planogram right now and we're working through that. I can't make a commitment to all doors until I know the space on the shelf or where the location is going to be, because I will feel more comfortable knowing that once I have that information. And if you're
Mm.
on the shelf, if you're on the dustbuster shelf where all
Mhm.
the dust bunnies are on the first shelf or two from the floor, that is a no thank you. It is, I would rather wait. Can I go on an end cap on an in and out? I'd rather not have planogram. I'd rather be in a temporary space for 12 weeks on an end cap so that I can test. I have to be able to test it. And
Yes.
and these are the kinds of conversations that it's kind of like going on a first date or a second or third date and not asking like, tell me about your dating history. What who, what has it been like for some of the women you dated in the past? That's the same thing with retailers. What do you do with brands that don't sell through at the threshold? How do you handle the exit? What does the back end in 12 weeks look like? What's success look like for you? And those are all really, really important things to ask.
I love this. So, a couple of things, some terminology for folks that don't necessarily know. Things like net 90, net 40, net 15. It's when you're getting paid. How many days until you get your invoice fulfilled? Sell through is like selling through all the product. And then for folks listening in, can you explain what all doors and factors are?
Sure. Doors are doors, meaning
Mm.
when you go to a Walmart or a Amazon or a CVS or a Target, they have CVS, I think, has 13,000 locations now. And so a door is one location. And a test, I love regional tests because you can then select a region that you can actually really love on. So I say, how many A doors? Because they break them out just like we would um our closet, right? Like I have my A outfits, B and C. This is kind of how I'm thinking life. Doors are the same. You have your A, B, and C's, and you want a mixture because you don't want just A doors to test. I blew out. Well, that wasn't really a blowout. That's an A door.
Yeah.
Get some C doors in there. Let's see how we perform on slower moving doors. And all of this is just for you to hedge your bets because at the end of the day, retail space is just like putting money behind ads. Would you put money behind ads where your CAC is $100 and your average order value is $15 and your cost of goods is $15? No. You
Mm-mm.
would do that math and go, okay, I'm losing $100 per order and there's no lifetime value because this is not a replenishable product. And those kind
Mm.
of metrics and that math is the same in retail as it is on D2C. You've got to run your basic numbers and just know how much risk am I willing to take and ask those hard questions. And net terms are your lifeblood
Yep.
because it's how soon, whether you're in a service-based business or in a products-based business, how quickly
Mhm.
you get paid is the difference between staying in business or not.
And being, to your point, being able to pay people. And something that I love that when you did your onboarding, you had mentioned being able to build against a recurring revenue stream and, cash managing your growth, which you've hinted to a little bit already. But can you walk people through this? Like recurring revenue is so critical to really, really healthy businesses. So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, that's why I loved the agency model, right? While you're building your new business, I'm calling the service-based or the revenue model for an agency or services-based business is pure cash, if you think about it, because you have no cost of goods against it. And that income is going to cover your overhead. Hopefully you're included in that number. I always like to include myself. I say pay yourself from day one because you'll never
Yes.
pay yourself
So
otherwise.
many, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs and especially women will do this thing of like, I'm sacrificing and I'm like, you need oxygen. You need
You have
oxygen.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to put yourself in to pay yourself. So I would say first consideration is how do you keep yourself in a sustained high growth, high income way to be able to afford to build and scale and grow? But
Yeah.
alternatively, the reality is as you think about each and every phase or step of your business, and I used to say to myself, once we get to 30 million, 50 million, 75 million, I'm going to have all this cash and then I'll have all this team and I'll have
Mm.
time off and I'll go on vacation. None of that happens. It's all a matter of whether you make that your priority or not,
Yes. Not at just one
right?
inflection point. Yep.
Not at one inflection point. And you have to make it enjoyable and fun along the
Hmm.
way. And it has to be something that you wake up in the morning and you really cannot wait to do. Because at the end of the day, there is no there there.
Yeah.
I promise you, at you know, even when we were able to get the business to 18% EBITDA margin and have all of this cash turning, there were so many other unexpected costs and considerations that we hadn't anticipated. Returns, problem product, something happened with a truck that flew off the road that we thought had, entire truck with 26 pallets on its way to Costco, and there was a windstorm and the truck never got to the DC. And I thought since it was Costco's truck that they owned the goods. And then I found out no, not until they accept the product into their warehouse do they actually take possession. So then the question is like, do we even have insurance between our manufacturing and the DC? Who owns that? And whose insurance covers that product? And it's those kinds of unexpected moments of things that take place at any given time that you just have to recognize like there is no playbook here. And
Yeah.
it's just part of the process and you've got to really love it and enjoy it. And in the at the end of the day, um, you've got to be absolutely in love with solving problems. That's got to
Yes.
actually be at the core of everything
Mm.
you do. If you're not in
Yes.
love with solving problems, if that's actually stresses you out, it's probably best to either partner with someone can who is in love with solving problems or find a day job and
Yeah.
and
Work for
just
the people
do it
that
as
want
a
to do it. Yeah.
yeah, and have it as a hobby. It doesn't have to be a
Yes.
big giant business. It could be a
Yes.
passive income or a second source of income for you, and that's cool.
It's micro entrepreneurship. I hate these influencers that are like the 9 to 5 job is dead and I'm like, no, it's not because not everyone should or wants to be an entrepreneur. We need everyone to play different roles. So I love this breakdown. And something that has been coming up for me, and you've mentioned this, is the different stages in terms of the revenue bracket you're at. So you even said 0 to 10 million, right? And then you get from 50 to 100. And I mean, this company is in the hundreds and hundreds of millions now. So what would you say, like, from the different stages you've experienced? Because only 1.7% of women entrepreneurs have ever scaled beyond a million. Just a million. Nearly 90% are not even at 100,000 in their businesses. So when you hear, or you want to not hear, but when you think of these women and they're thinking about growing a business, what are the expectations that you think is critical for them to know at these different thresholds. So you mentioned, let's say 0 to 10 million, and maybe we do
Yeah.
0 to 1 million to start, then to 10,
Yeah.
and then these other ones. What has been your experience that maybe you didn't even expect?
Yeah. I think so. One thing is always, always, always start any business with the idea that the of the end in mind. So every single entrepreneur who starts a business exits 100%. And they exit either flat on a gurney out the front door because you only have so many years on the planet, or they sell, or they close the business down. In all three scenarios, you have an exit. Okay. And what I want people to think about is how do you protect the five areas to create value for yourself so that you can actually monetize and sell that asset? Even if you have to close it, you can still monetize and sell the value that you've brought. So, what do you have to do that? One is intellectual property. So, everything needs to be intellectual property bucket, needs to be protected, like the KFC chicken recipe. You have to think of intellectual property. What is that? Process, how you do things, your Rolodex, your customer database. What are those customer relationships? Your go to market, how you go to market and what you do to rinse and repeat. Your marketing strategies, all of your naming, your formulation. This is all part of that intellectual property bucket. And you need to know where it is and be able to protect it. So I have a great low fee high results oriented small business lawyer who helps women come in and men, but works with a lot of women, Heather Pierce. She just comes in and she helps you systematize your intellectual property. And it's mission critical. Even if you can't afford it, like I can't afford a lawyer. If you say, I can't put five to $10,000 aside to lock up all my intellectual property, systematize it and file it and know where all of that is. You shouldn't start a business because at the end of the day, it's like a leaky bucket. Without having your intellectual property protected, all this stuff you're doing is day job stuff where you're trading time for money. So even if you have a service-based business, you have intellectual property, you have customers, you have a go-to-market, you have a marketing plan, you have a formula for how you do your business. It has to be scalable and it has to be repeatable when you go on vacation. And that is what intellectual property does. And then putting all of those systems into an SOP so that I make an SOP for every aspect of my business. The easiest way to do that inexpensively is you set up ChatGPT, you record every meeting, you have it, you put it into the chat, you create a GPT around SOPs, and you have it spit out an SOP for every single thing you guys do in your business. And it's absolutely critical because whoever comes to buy that wants to look at the fact that you have a process built and just do it from day one. It makes life so much easier. And that 0 to 10 million stage is also about grit. Like, do you have what it takes to do what it takes? And that means I hear founders say, "Oh, I don't do sales. I'm in product. I'm really a creative."
You don't have
Babe,
a
if
business.
you're in business, you're in sales.
Yes, period.
Okay? And so I meet with founders who are like, "No, no, I'm actually just like the product innovator." And I say, "You better go find yourself a partner who loves to sell, who has skin in the game, and you are going to co-create and build." Because at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable in sales, you should go do something else. Because being an entrepreneur requires you to be front facing to the customer and sell. And it doesn't have to feel like sales, it can feel like asking questions. But if you can't do that comfortably and interact and have high EQ, to divert or revert or move off of what you had intended and move into solving their problem, then you should not be in business. So that 0 to 10 is
Yes.
key.
Yes, this is what's so important too, is the number one thing that every woman on this podcast has done extraordinarily well is sales. So I'd love that you mentioned this. And I mean, you've gotten this company, I mean, to a place most people, men and women, have not gotten companies. I mean, you got it to 750 million and then you sold a majority stake. Can you walk the folks listening in, what What did that process look like to sell a majority of stake? And what does that look like for you now?
So that was a cumulative number over the lifetime of the business. The highest we ever got in revenue, but I think it's pretty impressive, is 100 million in revenue for a year
Amazing.
for 12 months. And I would tell you that um that was based on a whole bunch of different really perfectly aligned um things. One being that we owned a manufacturer at that time, so we could be very nimble and supply quickly. We're able to turn product quickly. We knew our costs very quickly. All of the things that came into play. By the time we got to a place to sell the business, the process of selling, and we went through it two separate times in the sales process, it was a very challenging process. Selling a business is not just bringing revenue to the table. If you don't have the things that I talked about earlier with intellectual property and SOPs and rinse and repeat scalability without the founders, you will always be um, negotiated down on your price point, and every single hole that you have in your bucket will reflect in the price in which your business will sell and the terms, because it's never about price, it's price and terms. Those are both mission critical. Can you imagine if I said to you, Alex, I'm going to give you $10 million for your business? Pause. Now, I'm going to have you pay me back 20% of that 10 million over the next 5 years. And I'm going to let you keep working for me. And I'm going to do it on a place where you can't compete. So you're going to be in this business with me. So you're going to be paying that back. I'm going to give you the 10 now, but you're going to owe me 20% of that each year over the next 5 years and your time, and you are going to give me all of your intellectual property that we co-create over the next 5 years. You would really have to sit down and do the math, right? And decide, does that really even make sense for me? I'm getting 10 now. I'm going to have to pay tax on it. I'm going to have to pay back five. Okay. And I'm locked up for 5 years and I'm earning whatever they tell me I'm going to earn. And all my ideas go to them. So that is a for example. That was not the terms in which I did my deal, but that's not an unusual offer. Okay. And so there are lots of tricks to the trade on deal structure and understanding what your net receipts are, how much cash you receive, and what the terms of that cash look like. And
Yeah.
understanding that with a really important part of the equation
Mm-hmm.
that you need to think through. But in the case of my exit, my final exit, and like I say, every single founder does exit their business, every single one. I don't care what you go out from um owning it forever and you just, expire and that's the end, to giving it to your children, to closing it, to selling it to a strategic or private equity. Every single one of those scenarios comes with its own pain points and considerations. And at the end of the day, I am so grateful that my transaction ended up the way it did, because I asked enough questions and I knew enough to protect myself at the end of the day from what I see a lot of founders end up with, which is a very dilutive, highly aggressive leverage cap table in
Yep.
which every time the business needs capital, they ask the founder to contribute their equity as part of the capital contribution, and is dilutive to the point of not having anything left. And you
Exactly.
think that's an exception? It is not. It is very common.
Oh my goodness. I think because there isn't a lot of transparency around sales, like, and how companies get sold, a lot of people are like, that is like the holy grail, right? But people don't usually see the inner workings of a sell. And for those of you listening in, we have a great episode with Carrie Kerpen and Lexi Grant who walk through the different structures. So you can go learn more there. And I love that, I see this a lot, especially with women founders, when we get to a certain inflection point, the way we give back. So, You do a lot of investing now and mentoring of women, other founders, especially women with Goodwill brands and Inner Fifth. From this work you're doing now, what do you feel are the key mindset set and operational shifts that you would like to see more women take on in order to get to their next level? Because again, like the numbers for us getting beyond a certain point, and hell, this is not to say every woman needs to have $1 million business. No, if you're at six figures and you're happy there, stay there. But
Right.
literally, only 10% of women are even getting to six figures. So, in
Mhm.
your work you're doing now, what are some of those mindset or the key mindset and operational shift you would like to see more women taking on to get to their next level?
I think a lot of women feel like they don't have time to set up an advisory and spend time with people who have been above and where they've been and exceeded beyond. And I will tell you, a lot of exec coaches, and I think every single CEO or founder needs an executive coach. If you don't have an exec coach and you are a founder, you're missing the boat because mindset is there's one fight that is barely survivable, and that is the fight against yourself and the fight against your mindset. That's the fight. That's the real fight, right? And so getting a mindset coach who can, or exec coach who has experience on helping you get into the right frame of mind. And if you can't afford one, you better be listening to Gary Vee for an hour every morning while you're getting ready, or one of these thinkers that really drive performance and results and really don't give a fuck if you don't feel like it. Like if you're going to be in business, you better feel like it. And if you don't feel like it and it's Thursday and it's raining and you're cold and you just broke up with your boyfriend and you don't want to do it, you better get in the right mindset because at the end of the day, you have a 30-day cycle in which to hit your numbers and your payroll is due. So I say if you can't afford a coach, get on YouTube. You can listen to your podcast. You can listen to my podcast. You can listen to Gary Vee. You can listen to any of these folks who will get you in the right headspace to push past no. And secondly, when you're thinking about what it's going to take for you to get to the other side, and remember that there's no there. If you have a year of consecutive I hate this and I'm not in the right place and I don't like what I'm doing, I would pivot. I would really pivot because it's really not for everybody. And it's okay. And it's okay to say, you know what, this is too much stress. I don't like how I'm this, my lifestyle doesn't, this is not what I want. It's okay. We're all going to have five, six, seven, eight jobs in our
Yeah,
lifetime,
yeah.
either for ourselves or for someone else.
It's interesting because when I think of, especially a lot of content now, I haven't been on Instagram in like 5 years, but I remember when I was like the Gary V's of the world were so heavy hitting on like hustle, grind, da, da, da. And there's nuance to being, I think, a woman versus a man and the permission we give ourselves. What would you say to women founders? Because what we see a lot in our community is like they're out there doing the work and putting their head down. A lot of times I see them not giving themselves permission to say, let me make sure I'm good. Like
Yeah.
they're pounding the pavement, they're gritty, they're doing the things. What would you say to them to make sure it's like you're not just go, go, go. You're actually still filling your cup too.
Yeah, that's why I say advisory board or a collaborative. I have a personal board of directors. I meet with them once a month. It's a 1 hour meeting. There are four of us. We get 7.5 minutes to talk about where we're having pain points, what our current business is, what we're dealing with. And we have 7.5 minutes for problem solving and Q&A. And we go around each of us. And I think that's free. It doesn't cost money. But you know what? I learn from the other people that are entrepreneurs. And I have just hit a new plateau on digital marketing. And I'm like, holy smokes, I can't even believe I hit these certain thresholds in what I've been able to do. So you know what I did? I made a list of 7 people that I know who are doing it bigger, better, and more badass than I am. And I said to myself, how about if I mastermind with these 7 people? I'm going to get a hotel. I'm going to get a room at the Peninsula Hotel. I'm going to order in lunch for all of us. I'm going to find a Friday. I'm going to get a whiteboard. And I'm going to bring these badasses into a room and see if they want to sit and problem solve or mastermind and think through what we could do to be bigger, smarter, better with this idea of full transparency. Like, are you down to do this? And none of these folks actually know each other, but I called each of them who I know and said, Carissa Bodner is an incredible entrepreneur, Thrive Cosmetics. You wouldn't believe how big her business is. What she's been able to do in digital marketing blows my mind. And I just called her and I said, would you want a mastermind? Would you want to do this? Here are the people I'm thinking of bringing into the room. Is this interesting to you? She's like, hell yes. I went around and did that with each person, and each of them are incredible. But can you imagine? I couldn't be asking for a more productive and better outcome way to spend my day,
Yeah.
because that's how we think creatively. That's how we get big ideas. And maybe I can help support her business at retail. She can help support my thinking in digital. And
Hmm.
I just think that's how we should be thinking, as take time away from your operating your day-to-day business and go invest in ways to find problems and solutions.
With people, which I like a lot of your story keeps going back to you reaching out to people because I hear this a lot. Like I'll speak somewhere or do something and people are like, oh my God, I would love to reach out to you or whatever. And you feel people get really intimidated, like that person doesn't have time, so on and so forth. So I like that you're putting yourself out there constantly to say, hey, let's just see if they're willing to do this. And if it's not the Peninsula Hotel, go to a cafe. That's fine. Yeah, so if it's not Peninsula Hotel, even though it's very cute, go to a
Yeah,
cafe
go to a
and
cafe, go to
mastermind.
Starbucks. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Whatever you can make it as fancy as you want on a budget. So I
that's
love
right.
that you're putting yourself out there. And the thing that I love to ask people as we wrap up is, what is your definition of success today and how has it evolved? This podcast exists because there's just so many tropes around what success as an entrepreneur should look like. And it's always been equated with a B, $1 billion, billion, whatever. And I loved what you said earlier that like that's not everyone's trajectory. Like, what is your lane? So I'm curious for you, when you think about success in this business today, even personally, what does that look like and has it evolved?
It has. And I equate success now with freedom of time. And so I challenge every single woman in my life who loves work as much as I do, loves her business, loves doing things. I'm like, what are you sacrificing in order to do this? Like, have you done your bucket list travel? Have you spent the time that you want to spend with your kid? Have you done the things in relationship? Do you have the love relationship that's your epic romance, that's bodice ripping, that you have all this joy and excitement around? And generally, answer is no, because they've poured themselves into their business. And so I would say to you to ask yourself those questions. Where are you in your love relationship, in juicy, great connection with a love partner? Where are you with your relationships with your family and the people you love? Where are you in terms of personal exploration and things? I have a list of the things that I want to learn. I want to learn to unicycle. I'm really excited. I want to learn how to box. I got to go ATVing last year. Now I want to ATV in a different location. I did it in the desert. Now I have a dream location for ATV. There are things that I want to do that are not related to work that I consider to be as important to my personal growth as the things that I do at work. And freedom of time, to me, where you have a self-operating business, that means you're firing yourself as an operator and moving yourself into the owner's box. Are you in a self-managing company, or are you setting yourself up to create one so you can have freedom of time?
I love
Success.
this.
Yeah.
Amen, Tracy. So, for those listening in, like Tracy's badass, I want to continue learning from her, supporting her work. What is the best way for them to do that?
Instagram, Tracy underscore M underscore Holland, or LinkedIn, Tracy Holland is the best way to connect.